We are live. You can keep track of
Few
it.
municipalities that.
This is Senate Appropriations.
No,
We're starting.
We are live.
Thank you, Alan. So this is Senate Appropriations. We are going through the Budget Adjustment Act as proposed by the governor and amended by the House. We have joint fiscal with us, and they're going to walk us through several documents so we can make sure we've decided what we agree with and what we want changes to be made. So which document would you like to go through first?
So I think the easiest one might be the web report,
Which is
which for those at home can go, it's on the website, on the JFO website, under subjects, appropriations and budget FY 2025, and then House budget adjustment documents FY 2025 budget adjustment web report. So for the record, Emily Byrne from Joint Fiscal Office. We thought it's important. There are changes happening not in the general fund. So that big spreadsheet that we've been going through is really just a summary of general fund changes, but you, as the legislature, authorized spending from all of the other funds. So we thought it would be important, and is important, that we also go through the web report, which gives all the summary of all of the other changes that are going on, so that what's going on in all the other funds, and you can sign off on all of those changes as well. So the first, and this is all in the budget bill. It's in the budget adjustment bill itself. Those first sections that are just numbers that are crossed out and then re-updated, the web report matches those numbers. So I can start right at the top with general government, where we have the change in the Agency of Digital Services. This is where there was an error in the budget in terms of we over appropriated to the internal service fund. So this is a technical correction that was in the governor's letter. And I'll assume if all is quiet, I will just keep moving.
We're fine with that one.
Great. So that's the only budget adjustment change for general government related to the judiciary, which is on the next page, I believe. Or they're at the bottom of this page.
Oh, the web report?
The web report, yeah.
Nice.
And so this general fund change, these are sort of on that big list, and these are all closed out. So I don't know if you want me to go through I'll skip the general fund changes because those are on the big sheet. We'll just touch base on the sort of other funds. So skipping past the judiciary and the state's attorneys.
Which page are you on?
Page
2 right now.
Yes. Sorry, I'm looking at it electronically for you. Help along. So in the next non-general fund appropriation is in the Department of Public Safety and interdepartmental transfer change. I believe they had some spending in the interdepartmental transfer fund, and they have to move it over to the general fund because they don't have the revenue in the interdepartmental transfer fund that they thought they were going to have when they built the budget. The next one in Public Safety Criminal Justice Services, B210. There's a change in their special fund appropriation. And yeah, so this one, they're moving money. This is actually linked to what was in B208. So they had what they thought was going to be special fund appropriations in criminal justice services. That special fund is not available, which means that they can't do the interdepartmental transfer in the one above it, and they're moving it to general fund. So there's actually movement in between B208 and B210 that involves the general fund and special fund revenue not coming in. So it's a technical change there. That is all the non-general fund changes in protection. Any questions there? All right, I'll move on to the Agency of Human Services. So in the Secretary's office, there's several changes. Probably best place if you have detailed questions is to look at the agency's ups and downs. This is just sort of realigning expenditures with available revenue across them, looking at their notes. across different funds based on what will be available. And what we'll see sort of in the next couple lines with the Agency of Human Services, a lot of in the next section, the B301, that's the mixing goal, the Global Commitment Fund. So all of the general fund changes happening in human services, or all of the Global Commitment Fund changes happening across the Agency of Human Services go into this mix, are matched through the Global Commitment Appropriations. So this is where we appropriate the state and the federal funds to bring all those Global Commitment Appropriations to fruition. I guess. Moving along in B305, that's the administrative fund. That's just additional spending authority to let AHS kind of move money between departments so they can meet their administrative expenditure obligations. Within DEVA, there's, their global, they don't have global commitment in the administration appropriation, but some changes in interdepartmental transfers in general fund to meet IT project needs and other movement within the agency. I don't know if there are questions on any of these. This all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Within B307 in the Medicaid and Global Commitment Program, this is where you have the big adjustment related to increased caseload and utilization in the Medicaid program, along with some other small adjustments. Same with Medicaid state only, is sort of changes in Medicaid and the Medicaid non-waiver matched line items, mostly caseload and utilization changes. In the health department, the change is sort of 50-50 general fund, state funds split. So that's their, that's mostly related to the service level agreement from the Agency of Digital Services. The public health change is general fund, substance use is the additional cannabis funds, which is general funds for substance use programs. Department of Mental Health is mostly their global commitment changes, caseload utilization, and the mostly PNMI caseload utilization. DCF administrative changes related to the service level agreement with Agency of Digital Services mostly. And changing, there's a changing how the appropriations for the CC WIS technically is being appropriated as a base versus a one-time appropriation. It's moving from personal services to operating in that one, which is small. In DCF family services, most of the non-general fund changes are related to sub-adoption caseload adjustments in sub-care and a couple other changes that I know the agency came in and testified to. The child development division in B318, those changes are primarily, the special fund change is primarily related to the utilization of the increased revenue in the child care special fund. So it's coming out of the general fund and then moving to that special fund. You'll see what's going on there. So child support is transferring of positions, the Office of Economic Opportunity that was federally and state funded. So that money is coming out of there and comes back up in the OEO appropriation. Age blind and disabled. The change there is caseload adjustments, primarily. General assistance, additionally caseload adjustments. Most of this is caseload adjustments. Same within B322, 3 squares. Additional federal funds can be drawn down due to the caseload adjustments. Savings in the reach-up program is due to caseload adjustments. That's a general fund change. Department of Economic Opportunity This is the net of some things moving around, some agency transfers primarily. And the moving of that position that I flagged in, I can't even remember where that was, up above, in the Office of Child Support. Dale administration, most of this is general fund changes with a little bit of federal fund changes related to their service level agreement. The Dale grants appropriation, which is B330, is funding there's a general fund change related to that, but there was a county municipal employees collective bargaining agreement adjustment that required some more appropriation there. Rehab is a general fund change, that's just a transfer to the administration appropriation. Developmental services is that same collective bargaining agreement, needing additional reimbursement for employees. Same with the TDI, home and community-based waiver, B334. And in B334.1 is the long-term care change. This is a combination of nursing home emergency financial fiscal relief as well as the Medicaid days adjustment. So it's sort of increasing
The emergency fiscal, not the emergency fiscal.
Emergency fiscal relief and increase in Medicaid bed days in the current fiscal year.
Okay.
Department of Corrections, this is the Justice Reentry Offender Management System and the SLA agreement. Vermont Veterans Home, which is a big general fund increase, but then also is utilizing additional special funds and federal funds. This is the adjustment that they're making to try to sort of reset their base budget and make sure that they have enough funding to, so they don't have to keep coming in for big budget adjustments. I think you see a similar change in the FY26 budget to reset their base. And the agency, now we're down to education, Ronnie, I'm gonna keep going.
What number is
B501. That's a general fund change, so I think you can skip that and check that. In B503, there is an education fund change. This is actually done in the House to $1 million reduction from the education fund. They had an updated estimate in what is needed for state-placed student costs. So the House reduced the education fund appropriation for state-placed students in FY25. Effectively, what that means is there's another $1 million that drops to the bottom line in FY25 that's available for next year.
And that's just based on they didn't need, there was less need to do state-placed.
Yeah.
That's just for norm.
Yeah, it's
normally
based
a
on how many
formula.
kids.
And then the House said, well, there was less, so they took it, no.
They
No,
didn't see
but
that
they,
education,
but they,
didn't
it sounds
need
like
as
they
much.
had updated numbers.
Yep. And I believe this one was in the C section of the FY 2026 recommendation from the governor. That was something they took from FY 26 and put it into 25 to keep it moving. The change in both B504 and B504.1, the adult education and flexible pathways piece, there's increased demand for the adult diploma program, so this increases the funding available to match the demand for the program.
Same with flexible pathway.
Yeah, they go together because there's a federal general fund, education fund match, and they get appropriated in two separate lines. They go together. There was the change last year that made it a 60-40 split between the education fund and the general fund.
For both of those, or just for the adult person?
For the adult ed piece. Or the adult diploma program.
Right, not flexible pathway.
Right. The education fund piece of the adult diploma program is funded through the flexible pathways appropriation, and the general fund piece is funded through the adult education, but they sort of go together.
Right. It's a very flexible pathway. It's the most flexible.
Yeah. So in B 505, this is the adjusted education payment. The governor recommended reducing the adjusted education payment in FY 25 by $11 million. That was because when the legislature passed the budget at the end of FY 25, there were still some towns that hadn't finalized their budgets yet. When those finally came in, it was $11 million less than anticipated. So that drops to the bottom line in FY 25. Same with the nutrition program. Anticipated expenses are $2.9 million less than was in the budget, so there's.
Otherwise known as universal needs.
Yeah,
Excellent.
that's what's going on in the education fund.
So
Senator Lawrence.
I do have a question on, so is this just based on they over budgeted, or this has something to do, you think maybe student population or
On the universal meals.
on universal meals, I'm sorry.
I can't remember.
My understanding was, they were able to draw down more money, but it basically, because it's part of the federal meals program. So the more money that we can draw down from the feds, the less that we have. So this 20.4 was an estimate, and we needed this 2.9 less. My understanding is that was made up with federal funds, but it could have been also just less.
Demand.
Can't imagine food costs went down, that could have been.
This is the demand for meal services was lower than anticipated, so.
So it was underutilized? No? Would that be safe to say?
It was either underutilized or the estimate assumed more utilization than.
Okay.
So it
Yeah,
could either be.
either way, yeah.
Well,
Or a combination.
the issue was partly that not as many kids avail themselves of the school meal as the population is this, and we've had someplace between the high 60s and the high 70s participation in this. So,
Percentage, right?
yeah,
Yep.
Okay,
not every kid likes the school meal.
They should have access.
Just saying, sometimes you have Jane to bring you lunch. Sometimes you don't have to go to the cafeteria.
They never asked whether you did it.
I'm just saying,
Right.
small children, you know, we follow the best meal.
All right.
Okay, so that's all education.
that's all education. So in the natural resources section, there is no, non-general fund changes. So since those were closed out yesterday, I won't go through those in detail again. And then the last bunch of pages are the one-time appropriations, that are also on that sheet.
So on
The only one, it looks like in the DCF, they proposed a one-time appropriation for the, Office of Child Support mainframe transition planning, which looks like it has a federal match associated with it, so in approving the funding, so the DCF can get the child support system off the mainframe, there will also be a federal fund appropriation associated with that in the one-time section.
so before you leave this page, cause like I consider kind of where we might see them again on other sheets, we're basically agreeing with everything we've gone over. On the treasurer's office one time,
Oh, yeah.
is 14 million. We'd like to propose to the committee that we revert all 20 million and not just 14 million.
I second.
So just so folks know that's kind of open, and we will see a different version to move that to 20 million.
And I should flag one of the, and I may have to remind you of this several times, but so this $14 million, there was $20 million appropriated, this is like technical, it'll be in the language, so Grady pointed out too, when we sort of draft this.
Right, so it wouldn't be real here.
It won't be
Yeah.
here, right? So when you see the web report, the $14 million will be here. On the reversions sheet, we will add a line that says revert $6 million. So the 20 million will be a combination of sort of two places in the bill.
We would still just do this because 14 million is needed to move to make up the house changes.
Yes, and it's like, it's funky because of what the emergency board did. So the emergency board took 14 out of the 20 million, and then the language said reappropriate the 14 million. So they sort of existed in two separate appropriations, and then the House didn't do this appropriation. so it sort of disappeared.
Is that a technical finance term, funky?
Yes, I've lost
I
it.
thought that was the JFO act.
It was funky, maybe.
Okay,
All right, what were the other federal fund pieces? Oh, so in the AHS, the 1100 subpart N, in the AHS one times, there's federal global Medicaid match for the GF portion of the global payment program. In DIVA, there is, so this is a duplicated appropriation, so you see it in the AHS central office one times is where you appropriate the federal funds and the general funds, and then in 1100O, which is DIVA, you have the appropriation of the global commitment funds for the global payment program, so it has to happen in two places, but those two are connected. Housing and Conservation Board was general fund. And this one and the other bills, this is a miscellaneous sort of technical change, but the Act 166, the miscellaneous cannabis amendments, appropriated $500,000 to ACCD administration, and it needed to be in the Department of Economic Development. So in those two sections, you see the money coming out of ACCD administration, and then it gets reappropriated into the Department of Economic Development, but it's a zero impact on the special fund, the cannabis fund, where the money was coming from. And then the last one is, we talked about this one yesterday, but in Act 181, there was $900,000 appropriated to the Land Use Board and LRB. And then rather than do it as an appropriation out of the general fund, the money was transferred into their special fund, and they can spend it out of their stuff. And that is the quick run through of all of the non-general fund appropriations in the budget adjustment act.
okay, and the totals on the back,
Yes, the totals are on the
you
bottom.
want to see that? Okay. So now you
I
can,
can go through that, but yeah, I can share that on the screen if you want.
Now we're looking at this.
You know, that's fine.
but they do match up, so sometimes you might want to look at both of them, because this has the explanation and where all the
For
money's
the
coming from, the
survey?
different funds, this is just.
I think you should ask,
We're on this one.
We're on this one.
Okay, yeah.
But these basically match.
Yeah.
But it's different.
This has all, this one is what finance and management prepares and has all of the detail.
What does it say at the top?
Governor's recommended budget adjustment, January 10th. It's the budget work, it's the BAA worksheet.
Got it.
The worksheet has the narrative stuff that the governors, and it also just has all the different funds, where this just has the number, you don't know which fund it's coming from. And we're not gonna go over the whole sheet, just remember we went over the sheet yesterday, the highlights that Emily did are the changes, or the open, not changes, open sections, changes, entries that we're talking about.
Great, so I will just touch on the highlighted sections. And we can leave them open or close them out right now. But so the first one in row 12.1 is the Attorney General's office. And I know there has been conversation about adding a position to the Attorney General's office and the Solicitor General's office. It will cost $50,000 in FY25, and then will need to be fully annualized in the FY26 budget. So this is open, and the money hasn't been added in yet, but.
Seems like you're on a different sheet than.
Yeah, I'm just,
Oh,
No,
here.
Oh, yeah.
now it's the 50.
I think we morphed over to here.
It's the one that's got the highlighted yellow on it.
This is
Handed
handed
out today.
What?
This
Oh.
is-
The one that I
They only
did.
did- they're the same, except anything that's highlighted on this sheet
Yeah, that's
won't be
what we
on.
went through yesterday.
Yeah.
So this is the governor's sheet,
All right.
but this is the sheet we're going to.
So that first, addition, it should say additional position, not positions, there's only one position being added.
Light green is not a good font.
That's a good call, I'll make it darker green. I was trying to go for, like the green stuff is the sort of Senate notes and the
Right,
red
you
is
just need
the
to use a
House.
very, you need a dark,
Green would go.
To match your carpet.
yeah, Senator Norris.
Yes, so if we, on 12.1, where it says $50,000, if we say, yeah, this is good, does that mean we're approving the position without, I don't know the actual cost when it comes time for the fiscal year 26?
Yeah, well, we would just be approving the $50,000 for this fiscal year. They will come back and ask for $181,000
$181,000 for one position.
for FY 26. That's what they specified. I mean,
And that's with benefits.
that's the fully loaded.
Right, so the salary is probably like 120 or something.
So basically, if we go with the 50, we're just saying that, yeah.
Or
let's go for
basically-
26.
You're basically approving this.
That's the same with
That's what I was
the,
thinking.
You don't have to say yes.
yeah, that's,
You got my track record.
Senator Norris just, that would be the same for the Human Rights Commission, two positions, where that 35,000 or whatever, it was just for this fiscal year, but then those two positions would come back next year. They're not at the level of the Solicitor General, so it won't be as much, but we're basically agreeing for those to be positions going forward.
We don't know what that cost would be, and
I think we did get a cost, but I don't remember what it was, because it was like almost like a clerk level position and then an attorney, but they were cheaper than the Solicitor General.
For the Human Rights Commission
Yeah.
positions, that, Amy, do you know?
Can find that. So yeah, so you didn't,
I didn't put it in yet, because I don't know that it hasn't been decided yet.
so it would be 50,000. It would, on this sheet, it would be an 05.
0.05, yeah.
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, I think it's a necessary position, given all the federal legal issues that we're getting involved in. And I think that's money well spent if we can secure more of our federal money that we're already legally obligated to get. That doesn't seem to matter too much under the current administration, so we need to have somebody that's really on top of that. So I think even if it's 181,000 next year, it's money well spent.
Took the words right out.
so my question on that, Chair, if I might,
Yeah.
of the 181, as a for instance, for next year, if the AG's office does what they do as far as the suits are concerned or whatever else, that's already a paid position. So if and when they're successful in their attempts and they do have some type of a settlement, do they once again take their 181 out of that? Or that's already a paid position.
Would be a paid position. I mean, these kind of, I think there is, when they make a settlement, like when they sue the tobacco company, they do get that kind of money. I don't know if they're gonna get those kind of settlements from the federal government for the kind of lawsuits we're talking about here. But if that person did do those kind of lawsuits to, like the tobacco company, or when they sued Meta and things like that, then that money does go back to the AG's office to help cover salaries, but only when they win and get the money. There is a settlement fund that they. Does that answer your question?
So could be a yes, but maybe not.
Right, depends on.
Well, yeah, I realize that. My concern was 181. So if they did get a settlement, it's going to the AG's office, at least there should be like some type of a reversion or something of the 181 back to the general fund is all I'm saying.
Well, sometimes it goes back, it depends on how it's set up and how it's structured. Because sometimes it comes back and it will be like, for example, tobacco settlement funds.
Or opioid settlement.
Or opioid settlement funds went to a special fund and then that gets dispersed out of there. But sometimes it goes back and it comes to the general fund and we have appropriated out of this.
Okay.
And we could look at their fund balance, FY 26, we could see what the fund balance is and the request for this position and make a decision on that.
Sounds fair.
Okay,
Okay,
so let's put it in the 50,000,
yeah.
0.05,
Yeah.
which if you're doing the math, would reduce the bottom line by that point. Okay,
Okay, so then the next one is line 18, the 236 is the Human Rights Commission. So there was a, about $30,000 change in the Human Rights Commission associated with, vacancy savings that weren't realized. They had budgeted to have some vacancies in their office and they haven't had any vacancies, and they're small enough that there's no real, and they're all people, there's no real flexibility if they're fully staffed. So there's a budget adjustment at this point to add money back in to deal with those, vacancy savings that aren't realized, but then there is also a request on the table, I believe, for another $35,000 to start the funding for 2 additional positions that would also need to be funded in FY26.
Yes, update from Amy.
So Amy Copeland joined this office. So I pulled up the human rights request, and it was for 62,000, not 35,000, which I had.
No, 62.
And so it's for an intake specialist and a staff attorney investigator.
So the 62 would be for the rest of this year. Do you have what they said, what would be the full year cost of those positions?
So the one would be 100,000. The other would be 132,000.
So the 62 is the 2 positions.
Yes, right.
And then the 35 deals with the vacancy savings, which we knew when we put together the budget last year, that they had a vacancy savings hole.
It would so be,
Yeah, that we didn't take care of all of it.
which the governor had in his.
Yeah.
So it's 100 and 130, is that what you said?
132, yeah.
Okay,
And these are professionals with training who will be investigators, and so the salaries are not in line with what those positions get.
One's an investigator, the other's an attorney.
Yeah,
so that would add 0.6, 0.06. We wouldn't see the 2 for the rounding. It would better be in there.
It would be about $90,000 total adjustment.
What was 35 that the governor put in, so it seemed like once other people object, we would add that money in for those 2 positions.
Mhm.
Okay, next one.
Next one, so going down to, there was an open, I think, question on whether or not we wanted additional language on the CCFAP caseload savings and the board revenue estimate.
I do have, you're talking about the language sections that
Right, and I don't know.
I will have I have a suggestion that Grady has.
Great, so I will not, there's nothing to talk about on the number side of this, so this is just a flag of this, and I don't know what we're gonna do, it depends on how much time there is today, whether or not we go through new language.
So for now, for the numbers, there's no change, but we might have changed for language. So we're closing out as far as this sheet goes.
So for the line 57, oh no, line 57 you closed out, never mind, let me keep going. 63, the provider stabilization grant, this was also a flag that I had a question on new language. So we can close it out pending new language, or leave it open until you see the new language.
I worked with Grady, and now it's language for them to report back in December about where the money went and what their recommendations are going forward in their success rate.
So similar to the other one, we'll keep it open so here that when we go through the language, but the numbers won't. We're not suggesting changes to the 10 million change.
Great. So on line 63.2 is where we have the cold weather exemption. The House put in to extend the cold weather exemption through June 30th.
So our committee reviewed the proposal yesterday. I remember, seems like 800 years ago. And the committee agrees that it should stay in as it is and approve that amount. One person wanted to know more about it because he's new, but everyone was very agreeable to continuing it for that 1.8.
8 point. 8 point,
No.
No.
1.8. Oh, yeah, that's a different one.
Yeah.
1.84.
Phew, 1.84,
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay, and then just as a side note on this, but it's related, on this super blown up sheet, which is on the back of that one, on the bottom, Emily did, because remember we were talking about the math of the 14 million? So the bottom kind of rust color, which includes the 1.84 for the GA extension.
Where's super one?
Last page.
The last of that,
The last page.
so just since the 1.84 is part of that 14 million, we're trying to figure out what the house did with the 14 million that we're reverting from the treasurer's office.
I see.
So I believe yesterday you said, wouldn't it be nice if we had the math handy?
Yeah,
So.
so they actually spent 90,000 over 14 million, but here are all the different things that.
Okay.
So my understanding is that with the recommendation from the Health and Welfare Committee, after that, we're gonna keep that in, let's do discussion about that.
I will say that for myself, I would much rather we be putting more into, shelters, and we heard, arguments a bit from the administration about congregate shelters in doing that. And, I don't think that the GA, cold weather exemption program has been all that successful.
So, and into context, with what you're saying, building shelters, it has, for congregate settings, for families in particular, is not well received and not, really advisable. Also knowing that the House Human Services Committee is working on a more complicated, not complicated, but complete, bill to, GA is not a program. Adverse weather is, but it's weather dependent, it's people dependent. So we don't really have a good set of guidelines to direct how we care for homeless right now. So having the bill come to us from the House will help to resolve this. We're keeping our fingers crossed for that.
I welcome
Yeah.
some look at this.
Yeah,
I would
we
just say for me, that over the course of the last 5 years, having dumped 300 million into, the motel program, that it would have been preferable to me if we were further along in shelters. And so the 1.8 for me.
We get it, and so I think everyone would like to see the hotel program end. There's no question about it. The goal is to have more permanent places for people to live. And this is again, it's a temporary situation. And as you said, 5 years, it's been at least that long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's disturbing because we have so many people coming out of the pandemic, and it's difficult. So we understand that, and it's complicated.
Senator Bruce?
I would just throw into Senator Westman's point, I think we've agreed, several iterations of this committee have agreed over the last 4 or 5 years that we would like to be moving out of the GA program, the motel program, into more permanent shelters where wraparound services are more readily available, et cetera. But honestly, we have not seen from the administration the work that was promised along those lines. 4 years ago, they were putting out RFPs to communities to stand up shelters. We provided money, but almost immediately that effort was canceled. And we have wound up in a Groundhog Day where each time we're asked to put less into the GA program and wait for more shelter capacity to develop, which is always just around the corner, but doesn't come in. So when Commissioner Winters was in, he said they have 650 beds now. That's great. It's more than we had before, and they should be commended for that. But against the scale of the problem, it's completely insufficient. So I hear Senator Westman, I agree with him in large part, but reluctantly, I don't see a way that we avoid continuing this program until that shelter capacity materializes.
I'll have to agree with Senator Westman on this one. It's not about the money, it's about, the way they listed is extend the cold weather program. Well, come May and June, I'm camping. So I don't know where that comes into play,
So, but,
but if I might finish, well, please, okay.
I'm sorry.
It's not about the money, it's about setting up shelters. And I believe that the shelters, when made, fixed, or whatever else, provide a better service than the hotel voucher program does. There's no food, no supervision, nothing more than a bed and either heat or air conditioning, depending on what time of year you may be in here. So I agree with, and I wrestle with this problem at any given point in time with it, because the millions of dollars that taxpayers, not we, have spent on this program, to include the ARPA fund. Obviously, that's still tax dollars that come into the state of Vermont. So I'm not quite sure where I am with this, but I'm leaning along with what Senator Westman has indicated.
Okay, Senator Britton?
Yes, I'm in the same mind frame. To me, I know it's not about the money, to me. I'd rather see it put into permanent shelters, even congregate for that matter. But just to give you an example, I mean, I live and represent town of Colchester. In Colchester, we house 46% of Chittenden County's homeless. And that's fine, but it's a drain on the community. It's a drain on the taxpayers. We're losing emergency staff. We're losing volunteer, emergency personnel, fire personnel. It's expensive, and they're getting no services for it. I like to see some services. I'd like to see some, a general improvement of the situation, and it's not happening. And I come from the other body, and I've been hearing the same story for the last 4 years over there. This year, we'll take care of the situation. We keep coming back. $300 million is a lot of money and could have went a long way toward permanent housing of some sort for these folks. So I have a hard time with this.
Okay, so we're talking about $1.84 million to extend a program. So right now, it's going to end in April when kids are in school and families are going to have to move somewhere, and we don't have the where. We don't have the place. And so when they move out, where are they going? April. We've seen snow in May and all that, right? And I've hiked Camel's Hump when it's snow in June. Well, we know it's that. So the question here is extending it to June 30th, providing some shelter for families and others. The DCF, I think DCF has brought us rules, emergency rules, regular rules that haven't met legislative intent from Act 113 last year, and we negotiated in really good faith in here with the administration, and actually the Senate lowered what the House did last year, all to the benefit of saving money. I'm not sure that I hope we have saved people. We don't have, we don't have the services, but we also have a workforce problem. There's a lot going on in there, and so fixing this problem it's not going to be fixed by taking that $1.84 million and putting it somewhere else right now. I don't believe that. I do believe that we need to be very concerned about having resolve this issue. It's gotten to the point where we're at the edge of the cliff and we can't continue with what we're doing. I agree with everything you've said, except it's a small bit of investment in human beings to keep them healthy.
Okay, well, unless somebody wants to call for a vote, my sense of the committee is we're going to keep it in. Close that out.
Is everybody comfortable not having a vote?
I think we've been clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't agree with it, we don't need to vote on
That makes you go quicker. Plus, the clerk doesn't have to do any work.
Thank God, because we haven't been briefed on how to do that yet.
Before we leave that topic, I will just say, like, I'm looking forward to seeing the plan that's gonna
Let's
come
hope.
through.
I mean, I'm relying on my
Yes,
peers in the House to bring me something, bring all of us something, and the administration has to be in on it. I mean, it can't be done independently.
And Pat has just vouched for the house.
Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do have one question.
Okay, Senator Norm.
Does this work as a bridge simply to get us to July 1st and that starts over again, or how does that work?
Well, there is, so remember this, there's no GA program, okay? It's not a program. So every year that we come into the budget, we have to make a decision. How much money goes into general assistance, housing assistance? And every year we have to decide how much money we're going to put into the adverse weather program. So there isn't a set program. And that is exactly what the House is working on. Now, last year, we got this large bill with all kinds of provisions that was extremely high cost. And so the negotiation happened in here to stick with the current way of housing people, and that is making a decision in the budget, now in the budget adjustment. So best case scenario, we get a program in place that offers some predictability. That's where we are. So we're gonna be back here. There's no question we're gonna be back here.
But it starts over again in July 1. That's a short answer.
I mean, it doesn't start over in the sense that like the 80-day rule and the
Yeah.
1,100 room rule would stay in, but it basically extends the winter rules where the room cap and the 80 days cap doesn't apply. So if whoever was at their 80 days on July 1st, they would have to exit the hotel on July 1st. So in a way, it moves it from April 1st to July 1st.
Unless we
Well, they have
countermand
carryover.
in the budget.
Yeah, so that would be part of the discussion.
And they can carry over. It gets complicated. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
we're gonna move on to,
Great, and so this next line item, I
yeah,
know
we might not.
there may be some more discussion on, and this may not happen, but I will just flag, for when we talk about the municipal grant program. One thing that came up was, last year in the budget, in B1100, subpart B, subpart 1, there was an additional appropriation made, of $200,000 for the floods that happened primarily in Addison County. So the way that the language was structured in the Budget Adjustment Act for the initial tranche of municipal grants didn't include events that happened in August. So there was there's a change in the budget adjustment to add funding for those events. But we heard from the agency administration, and we estimated what that amount should be based on what we knew at the time in terms of damages in the towns affected by those events in August. After the budget passed and the sort of amounts got finalized, the appropriation wasn't sufficient to make those grant payments. So because they didn't have enough money to make the grant payments haven't been made. So that $200,000 is sitting there. So in looking at this, we thought JFO would recommend it probably makes sense to address this $200,000 appropriation and wrap those disasters that happened in Addison County into whatever the committee decides to do with a larger grant program for municipalities that were impacted by floods last year, so that there is enough money to cover those towns that were appropriated the funds were appropriated in last year's budget, but the grants haven't come out yet because they need more. So then we would sort of tweak this line item and then put it into whatever the next big pot of money is.
So this line item would, if we were to provide the grants to the municipalities for the flood damage in 24, that would still be on this line item, or would you put it somewhere else?
We would put it somewhere else.
Where would you put it?
It depends on how you decide to fund it. So if you fund it
If
with
it's general fund,
general funds, we would add a line that would have so there'd be $200,000 down and then an increase in the general fund for the full amount of the Addison County grants.
but it would be in this one-time adjustment section.
Yes.
It would basically
Yep.
be there.
Yep.
Okay, and so should we talk about that now?
If you want to.
So if people go back to the super large font thing on the very back. At the very beginning, this is the proposal for municipal grants, at the very top of that,
Okay.
which is kind of a light tangerine color, is proposal for municipal grant.
Yeah, so I know that, the conversations initially were to potentially use the balance in the pilot fund, so this, assumes that we need $1.8 million to cover the sort of, that first line of the uses, the DR 4762 VT and the DR 4774 VT, those are those two Addison County events. The, amount needed for those Addison County events is about $350,000. That'll be that amount, and then the grants to communities impacted by, and I didn't have the disaster numbers for the July floods of 2024, but that's estimated to be about $1.45 million, so we would use a total of $1.8 million.
Are we gonna get a listing of the communities? Oh, thank you. That's nice.
Oh, cool.
So there's two things to say. This one talks about the sources being the pilot funds that we talked about. We were gonna hold off on that since we have that money that we want to revert from the treasurers, the 20 million. So I'm proposing, instead of doing it from the pilot funds, do it from the money we're reverting from the treasurer's office. So there'd be general funds.
I like that.
I like that too.
And this list, Amy did the good work of working with, I don't know if that's AOA, basically, to find the damage of the towns, and applied the same formula we did last year to be fair to the towns last year and the towns this year, that based on the individual damage of the individual and institutional damage. I can't remember who it
Not
was.
individual, just the municipal damage.
Just the municipal damage. Have formed these grants, whether they're 10,000 up to 75,000. So basically, the more damage you have, the more you'll get 75. You have 75 maximum. And if you have just a little bit, you have a 10,000 grant. There's a lot of caveats in here, which I think Amy wrote on here a little bit, but some of these things will change. There's an asterisk by Kirby because we know that money's coming in, but just as we experienced with Addison County last year, there could be some slight changes. So we don't have a precise number on the sheet, but we think the 1.8 million will cover what we need for.
Does that zero out the pilot fund, pilot balance?
No, the pilot has $10 million in it, but what I'm saying is, because I'm concerned about what we want to use the pilot fund for, instead of taking that money for this program, I'm suggesting we take that money that we're taking from the treasurer. So that we're reverting that extra 6 million of the 20 million. The House used 14, that leaves 6. Center Alliance has a proposal of a bill that uses 1. So it would take this 1.8 would be general fund, but where we're getting that general fund money is that bond redemption fund that we're reverting from the treasury. And then we can have a discussion for the pilot fund at a later date.
I like that.
And then if you want to know what's kind of behind this sheet, you can talk to Ms. Coate. She can give you like what the damage is of each town or information.
I know all the towns in my district. I know what happened there.
Yeah.
Cool.
So there are some towns that, you know, like Barry had a lot of damage. They were at the highest number last year. They're still on it this year. So there's some towns that definitely got hit both years. And, you know, as we heard from the league, a lot of these small towns just have basic cash flow problems. So these floods really hurt them. Some of them are borrowing money. These one-time grants will be a big help to them just to kind of make ends meet as they just continue to try to recover. Yes, Senator Watson?
I assume that, like, the electric departments that are listed here are because they are municipally owned.
Yes. It's listed as the Hardwick Electric Department, but I think you would think of that as the town of Hardwick,
Right.
because they're municipally
And
owned.
there's also like Morrisville, Water and Light.
Morrisville Water and Light, that is their water system. Their water
Oh, wow.
system is in a field beside the Moyle River, and it wiped out one well.
Yeah. It's just interesting that it's listed as that and not just like the town of.
Yes, and I don't know, I remember we were talking
Town.
about that, why it was listed that way.
That's how, so when I requested municipal data,
Yeah.
that's what I received.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it
no,
could
that's-
be
that's-
bad data,
Well,
yeah.
But we know those are all our municipal utilities, so
Right.
it's not like a private utility is gonna be
Right.
getting
No,
the
but
money.
it's, the Morrisville Water and Light is technically owned by the village of Morrisville, but has 4,600 customers in Wilkes and a number of towns.
So basically, for that line item that we were just going over on the big sheet, where it had negative 200,000, proposing that we would add in 1.8 million.
Yeah, so I will add a line, below this, because it will still go to the, Agency of Administration, and we'll probably reduce the 200,000, then reappropriate 1.8 million. To the Agency of Administration.
And then AOA sends these grants out to the towns. So unless there's any objections to that, we're gonna move on. The bond redemption, this is the 14 million, the House reverted, but we're gonna revert 20 million. So that would change from 14 to 20 in the Senate column.
Well, and as I mentioned on the web report, this will stay as 14. In the reversions at the bottom, we will add $6 million.
Okay,
Because we're gonna have to revert prior year appropriation.
but you wouldn't do it in the Senate column, you would just.
It'll be in the sense, the total reversions are at the bottom,
Josh,
and the reversions are 21.9 million. Right now, we're gonna increase that by 6 million, so it'll be $27.9 million in the Senate column, which I'll put in the notes that will reflect the additional $6 million from the treasurer's office.
the next we have the two VHCV appropriations that we heard of, that's coming out of that 14 million, which is the math is on that back page. Are people okay with that? Do we want to talk about it? My sense is that people are okay with it.
Makes sense.
Feel better about it.
Westman?
Clearly, I think the more we can keep on the bottom line, the better off we are. And, from what I heard, the 2.8, is finishing up of a project. What we basically heard is the awarding of the money would not be, for the 8.6 would not be until May or June. And from my vantage point, they could award in the June meeting, the money in, the next year's budget, because they will know by that time what it is. But to put that, the $8 million, I would much rather that be sitting on the bottom line waiting for us, just in case we needed to think about, where it was. There's lots of questions about federal money, coming and all of that. I'm not opposed to the 8.6. I just don't know what the world's gonna look like. And I think if they aren't gonna distribute the 13 million that they talked about and this until, May or June, we really aren't holding up any money by putting it on the bottom line and waiting to see.
Just a question on that, and I agree, I hate to play follow the leader, but I do agree with that concept. The money, should we
Sorry.
put it in reserve? It's still designated for the same purpose, correct?
Could we, like, if you're following what Senator Weston?
Yes.
Holding
I mean,
it.
it's not gonna go anywhere else. We're holding it and using it in the 26 budget for the same purpose.
Well, we could be, or it would set on the bottom line and
Right.
we would make a decision
Yeah.
in that context.
And we would be the ones making that
And we would
decision.
want to be the ones making the decision. I think we all have housing as a priority for us. And I, hope we can do it. I'd like to do more than that when I get to the 26th level, but I don't know what the federal government's going to do.
Yes, Senator.
I would just say, I don't disagree that there's not a big difference between the timing, if we were to do it in the budget or here. But it does seem to me there is a difference, that we would gain something by having one here. And over the last few years that we have at least once, if not more than once, primed the pump in the BAA for housing, especially when we had the ARPA money. And given everybody's agreement that housing is a crisis and driving other crises, it, to me, especially since this is coming from reverted funds from the treasurer that we hadn't counted on, I support it being here. Although in general, I think Senator Weston.
I would just say to you, I think money coming down from the federal government at this point has never been more questionable.
Fair enough.
And I would say in the last 5 years, it's been completely the opposite through COVID. We've had lots, but I think the amount of match money and grant money coming down from the federal government to us at this point in time is more questionable than it's ever been in practically our history.
Any other comments on this? Well, from my perspective, I think we should do it. Totally agree with the, adult children with disabilities pilot projects. I think the 8.6 is important in that even though they're not going to award it till May or June meeting, it's helpful to know now that that's going to be there and that they can start preparing for that, and that they're prepared the next solicitation and prepared for the next budget. We have, the governor put the whole statutory allotment, which I think was 36 million in the FY26 budget. I think if we had an emergency situation, we'd have opportunity to move there. Also, I feel like our housing crisis is such a crisis that any money that we can put into it now and any time that we can save to get moving quicker is a huge benefit. And it might be that we don't have as much federal money, but without the housing, we're spending so much money on the problem of housing and losing so much economic development. I think it's worth putting that extra money in there now that we have, especially since we're reverting it from the treasurer, that it's worth doing for housing. I wouldn't do it for other things, but I think that's such a crisis and has such ripple effects throughout the whole economy. It's worth doing, and I think we should agree with the House with that. So do people want to take a vote on this? So we can do like a straw vote, like a show of hands.
Mm-hmm.
Can I put half a straw up?
You can, I'll still count it as a full straw.
Yes or no question, ultimately.
This is a tough one for me, to be quite honest with you, because I agree with Senator Westman about holding money on the bottom line. I'm very concerned about what's happening. And right now we have a lot of money, so we feel good about doing this, about putting it in. We also need housing in many different ways and for different groups. And we heard from Gus Seelig today. It was very compelling what he was talking about and how we could use the money. So there's half a straw for both. It's just like.
Yeah, I hear that. And one thing that he said before you had testimony was one of the applications they have is for a shelter that they could, you know, be able to move on. That's gonna help with our, you know,
That
having
one
no.
That might make it a 3/4 straw. We got it.
Because we don't have a lot of those because of the workforce, there's people to run the shelters, but they do have one in line for the funding. This would make that go all that much quicker.
So just to weigh in on this, I feel like I could argue both sides, and so I do see it, the perspective of leaving the money on the bottom line. But having said that, I lean towards including it, and the reason being, you know, supposing, you know, federal dollars go away to some lesser or greater degree, that ends up putting a lot of pressure on the Vermont economy on the whole, and in the end, the pressure that is going to be most acutely felt is if people don't have housing. And so even in the case where we lose federal dollars, housing becomes even more of a priority, I think, for folks.
How does this relate then to what we heard from Maura Collins about inflationary pressures? Well, I won't go there.
Yeah, I think it's a little different.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I would just say our single biggest spending item in the general fund is Medicaid. And we are in a position where I have no idea what's going to happen at the federal level with Medicaid.
Right. Well, nobody does, but I think Senator Watson's point is our Medicaid expenses will go up even further. There are more people that aren't housed. And this is an investment in that direction. In other expenses.
I totally understand that, but I'm not emptying a nursing home for anybody.
Right.
And I'm not inclined to want to close hospitals or primary care.
Okay. So those that want to keep it in, raise your hand. Those that don't want to take out the. Okay, so it's 4-3, so we'll be.
Is that 3.5?
3. We each got to be inclined.
3 3/4.
It's actually 4.5 to 3.5. You got a half vote on each side.
That's right.
So we'll keep that in, but good discussion. So that moves us down to 88.
Yes, row 88, additional reversions. So this is in your packet, I believe it's the next page, it has green on top, it goes on 2 pages.
Is this the judiciary?
This is all of the reversions.
So the reversions total is 21.9 million, and then the next sheet has all of that.
There's all of them listed. I believe when the departments and agencies were in, they spoke to these, but right, these are prior year appropriations that the administration.
Well, didn't we have somebody go through these?
You did.
Yep.
Oh, Amy went through them, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you go through them? We've been through it.
Somebody went.
We went through
It was a really good job.
It happened.
We remember it well.
These are all prior year appropriations that have been identified that don't need, that either the project is complete, the funding isn't needed anymore, there's new money, so these can be pulled, the spending authority can be eliminated and put back into, the money goes back into the general fund to be available, so that, there was some in the House, as passed, or not in the House, in the as passed budget, that's what you see in the first column, these are the ones that were originally in the budget. Then the governor added a whole bunch, $19 million more than was in the budget to get to a total of $32.9 million worth of reversions. The House accepted most of those. They added a few. So there was, and the one that they added, right, so the $3 million from the appropriation that went to the Agency of Administration for the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, that $3 million was reverted and then reappropriated to, or not reappropriated, it was transferred to the State Liability Insurance Fund.
And that's the one we heard from Mara today about the RAFT program not needing that $3 million.
correct.
And this
then-
was in the governor's FY 26 budget proposal, they just moved it forward to the VA.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the remaining two changes in the House, there were two appropriations proposed by the or two reversions proposed by the administration from the judiciary related to the Essex County courthouses. And the judiciary was under the impression that that money would go back to them, but it didn't, so the House made an adjustment so that these reversions do not occur, and then in the language, there are changes to the language that leave that money with the judiciary so that they can complete projects.
Other projects for other courthouses or something?
One in Essex County and one in general for security.
I think it was.
Yeah, it's in the language
We'll be going
for
through it.
network wiring, and then the other is related to the Essex Meeting House, so they have an ADA accessible bathroom.
Oh, right.
Okay.
So those were the changes in the House. And then what we will do is add a line for the remaining $6 million from the treasurer's office to the Senate column. And then there'll be an additional $6 million in the difference column from the House in the Senate version. Those are the reversions. I don't know if there's anything else we want to do in reversions.
Any comments, questions on that? Straightforward, okay. Transfers? Or that just, that ends the first sheet, or do you have a transfer section?
The transfer section. Oh, I guess I didn't highlight the direct applications, the negative 11.3 million. If you go to the next sheet, past the green one, it starts with yellow on top, which looked familiar because we went through it yesterday. But yesterday we only got through the top part, which was the transfers. These are the transfers into or out of the general fund to other special funds.
So Amy, and Emily filled in the Senate column on what we, when we agreed to it yesterday.
Yeah. And then the ones that are listed separately on the BAA transfer sheet, because they were big changes, the debt service change and the cannabis regulation fund change. So more coming in from the cannabis fund, more needing to go out the debt service fund, just sort of based on the timing of when the treasurer issued bonds last year. And then the last one we did go through, that sort of orangey color at the bottom, is the direct apps, which means like direct application of special funds into the general fund. The biggest one is from the Department of Financial Regulation every year. So there were some changes in the governor's recommend that the House accepted. And it was mostly related to less money coming in places except for unclaimed property. So the sports wagering estimate is coming in lower. I think they talked about it seems that Vermonters are winning more than anticipated, so we're not going to get more money into the general fund. The liquor control fund, there was a transfer set in statute as opposed to transferring whatever was left in the liquor control fund. So it created a deficit in that fund, so they're reducing the transfer to align more with what the excess revenue will be. There's additional money coming from unclaimed property, and then the Department of Financial Regulation transfer has been reduced based on where they think the projected receipts are. So that's where you get the negative 11.3 million in changes in the direct applications to the general fund.
Thank you. And the last sheet, we had a hard gone over with the.
Yes, I believe so. And this will change. I can update this, but so the blue box in the middle is the only one we hadn't talked about, and this is sort of showing those changes. $200,000 for the Addison County grant, or Addison County grants, sort of coming back into the general fund, and we funded the additional positions at the AG's office, and this one, we updated this number to $62,000. So additional money to the Human Rights Commission, is about $90,000 that's unallocated. That will drop to the bottom line.
So this HRC position should be increased, right?
Yeah.
To the 90.
And that's all of the numbers, I believe.
Okay.
So we'll make those updates, and then on Tuesday, we can look at sort of what's left. If I've updated my sheet correctly, which shouldn't do math on the fly, If it's about a $6 million difference from the house, which most of that $6 million will, or, no, this doesn't, I'm not doing math on the fly,
Yeah.
this doesn't include the, I'm gonna stop sharing this. It doesn't include the, grants, municipalities, so no math on the fly. Number
Okay.
one rule, get
So we will get a new sheet like this on Tuesday that'll have what we agreed to today, final numbers on the bottom, and then we will vote on it. So we still have to go through the language. This whole thing, and we have new language, which I'm gonna propose that Grady, I know Senator Norris has to leave, but if Grady could just hand it out, maybe we'll go through it mostly on Tuesday. I think we have the time in our schedule to do that and vote on it on Tuesday. And people can have an early Valentine's Day.
Did we just vote?
Huh?
Did we just vote?
Yeah, we voted on leaving early. So Grady, we
Thumb scale.
take chair. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
And then people could read this on the Valentine's Day weekend. They
Nice.
could read the language.
Sunday is gonna be.
Read it aloud
appropriating day.
dramatically
Yeah.
to your Valentine.
Yeah.
Figure it
Stay
out.
in.
I'd be totally impressed.
I'm not going home to read this to
What a way to
Joe.
Hot chocolate.
win their
It
heart.
would not go over, Jay.
I think we're doing them all this way.
I think we are.
Well, I was going to-
No, there we go.
There you go.
No,
One more.
please stop. All right.
Hey, thank you.
So this doesn't have the,
So, this document, you'll see on the top of it, it says as proposed by Senate Appropriations. That's just because it's the working document. It doesn't have any changes from the House as passed. So this is the House as passed version of H 141.
so the difference between the two versions you gave us last time and this version is only the there's highlights, or there are other changes? we
This
well,
is just the prettier version of the document, so it doesn't highlight what was changed from the Gov rec. It just shows the bill as it currently exists.
So we can't really read these to our Valentines. It's the same document
We've already done it.
that we read to them the other night.
So,
There are some changes, right, from
But-
this document, other than.
Yes, so that document, the committee might remember was missing, that bump up of the GA. The 1.8 million wasn't reflected in that annotated version. So you'll see that that is in the House as passed version. So I just wanted to present the committee with this document because it reflects all changes that the House made.
You
So
get
it's
that?
all proposals from the House made, but none of these changes that we decided today.
None of the changes that SAC has planned to make were accepted.
But the SAC changes will be in a new version.
Yes, so when the committee meets next, there will be a packet of language, that's all of the new language. And once that language is approved and finalized by the committee, then you'll have your version of the bill ready.
Senator Westman.
so if we make suggestions, they'll be highlighted someplace so people can see them.
Yes,
So for example, the language that Westman had on a couple places is not in here.
correct.
We'll see that on Tuesday, and then we'll vote on it to add it in, possibly enough time to do that and get a quick
I
copy.
keep kicking your feet.
In my experience, as a rule, the Westman language always comes in at the very last.
Yeah,
No, in my language, Grady said for a couple days.
so I don't think we have any other testimony
I'm not
on
Bobby
Tuesday.
Star.
We have a.
You're Vince Aluki.
I went treasurer.
Okay, so we're gonna, the treasurer sent us a memo, which I don't know if folks read. He had some suggestions for the VA. He's gonna bring that in Tuesday. If we're wowed by that, we could make changes, but we will see that language before we vote. But other than a couple testimonies on one testimony in FY 26 budget, the treasurer, and then we'll have Brady go through this, get a clean copy, vote it out. So we need to vote it out on Tuesday, so we won't leave until we vote it out.
Nice.
Yes, Emily?
Motivation.
You also received a technical letter from Adam today, I believe.
Oh, we did?
Adam Gresham, yeah, so we may wanna look at,
Okay.
Grady, we'll go through it and flag them and then, whether or not it raises to the
And
level.
whether
of
they really
true-
are technical or not? Okay, so that's part of the language that we'll walk through. Okay, great. Thanks, Ray. Sorry you didn't get to go through it all.
I think I'll live.